Have you ever noticed how much of the daily news isn't actually about what happened, but about who gets to decide what happens? Like who is actually in charge?
Oh, totally. I mean, it really is all about control. Who controls the exams you take or the borders you live within or even, the money you send across the globe. Everyone is just desperately trying to prove they still hold the reins.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. It is Wednesday, August 19th, 2026. And we have a massive stack of 11 distinct sources to get through today.
We really do. We're covering everything from the Supreme Court testing the center's exam security to some crazy historical cricket milestones in Sri Lanka and a major geopolitical escalation from the U.S.
Right. So our mission here is to just cut through all that noise. We're going to unpack the how and why behind these headlines and give you the insights you actually need without the overwhelm. So let's get right into it. We're starting with this massive test of institutional control. We're talking about NEET, the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test. Now, if you want to study medicine in India, this is the gatekeeper exam.
The absolute bottleneck.
Right. But lately, the public debate has just been dominated by allegations of leaks and, well, systemic vulnerabilities. And according to a report in the Times of India, the center is now trying to convince the Supreme Court that their new security measures are entirely, and this is a quote, foolproof.
See, foolproof is a very heavy word to throw around in a courtroom.
It really is.
But, I mean, they did detail some very specific logistical upgrades to back it up. For instance, the vehicles that physically transport the question papers, they're now fitted with GPS devices.
Okay.
And these trackers are apparently configured to record and alert the authorities to, like, even the slightest deviation from the planned route. Yeah, and they also focused on the academic side. They explained that they're using multiple moderators to create the question bank. So the idea is that the process is so randomized, none of the actual moderators know which questions will make it to the final paper.
Okay, I have to stop you there because calling any system foolproof feels like a stretch.
Right.
I mean, it's like putting a massive state-of-the-art titanium padlock on a door, but the walls of the house are made of drywall. Like, sure, the lock works, but someone can just smash through the side of the house. You can track a trunk with GPS, but what happens before the papers even get on the truck?
Exactly. And, the Supreme Court seems to agree with your drywall analogy. They aren't just buying this whole GPS tracker defense as a cure-all.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
According to the report, they are demanding an affidavit. They want to see exactly how the government is implementing the recommendations from two major advisory bodies, the Radhakrishnan Panel and the Nandan Nilekani Committee. The court wants a structural overhaul, not just a logistical Band-Aid.
So what does a structural overhaul even look like in this context?
Well, they're demanding a sovereign database.
Okay, meaning...
That means a highly secure, state-owned digital vault for all exam data, rather than relying on, vulnerable third-party servers.
Got it.
Yeah. And they also want dedicated testing centers, a permanent committee just for paper sealing, and, crucially, oversight by a director-rank officer who is strictly responsible for security.
Right.
They want someone whose entire job is to ensure the integrity of the drywall, to use your metaphor.
Right, right. Well, that friction between the public's trust and the government's reassurances, it isn't just happening in a courtroom. We're seeing a direct bridge from the integrity of exams to actual political mobilization over those very exams.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, look at this report from the Telegraph regarding the Congress Working Committee, the CWC. It's the highest executive body of the Congress Party, and they just held a massive meeting in New Delhi to hammer out their nationwide attack plan.
Right, and they are zeroing in on 4 key issues where they believe the government is highly vulnerable right now. The exam leaks, like NEET, are right at the top of the agenda.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah. And then the second issue involves alleged irregularities with Ram temple donations. Third, they're focusing heavily on reports of Chinese incursions. And fourth, they are targeting the upcoming delimitation exercise.
Okay, just to quickly clarify delimitation for you. It's the constitutional process of redrawing boundaries for political seats based on population changes. Congress is formally demanding a freeze on the Lok Sabha's strength at 543 seats for the next 25 years.
While still implementing a 33% women's reservation, right?
Exactly. They want to ensure that southern states, which have managed their population growth better, don't lose their political power to the more populous northern states. But, the electoral math is only half the story here. The Telegraph report specifically highlighted the Haldwani purification incident. What exactly is the social angle they're playing there?
So this is where Congress is merging their administrative critiques with some very deep-seated social grievances. Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge, who is the lead, recently attended an event at a rally venue in Uttarakhand.
Okay.
And afterward, individuals identified as BJP workers reportedly, quote-unquote, purified the venue.
Wow. I mean, that is a stark, visceral insult.
It really is. And the CWC, they aren't letting it slide as just some fringe local incident. They actually adopted a formal resolution demanding an apology from the Prime Minister over this.
Really taking it to the top.
Yes, they're framing it as a direct, systemic, caste-based insult toward Kharge. And to back up their claim, they cited comments from an RSS-affiliated professor made during a television debate. They are actively trying to mobilize voters who feel marginalized by these exact kinds of actions.
So you have Congress going aggressively on the offensive there, but we have a direct bridge to another opposition party that is currently facing immediate legal hurdles and playing desperate defense.
Right, AAP.
Yes. This is also a report from The Telegraph. Former Delhi Minister Satyendra Jain, who is a major figure in the Aam Aadmi Party, he's just been arrested by the Anti-Corruption Bureau. And this relates to alleged irregularities in a tender process for the Delhi Jal Board, which manages the city's water supply.
Right, and I think it's important to note Jain's history here. He previously spent like 18 months in jail on a separate money laundering matter. Now he and 5 others, including a former DJB CEO, have been produced before a special judge, and Jain has been remanded to 14 days judicial custody.
But the actual mechanism and, well, the timing of this arrest is what his legal team is loudly contesting in court, right?
Precisely. His counsel pointed out this glaring timeline discrepancy. The FIR, the first information report, which officially kicks off a police investigation that was registered way back in May 2024.
Okay.
Jain was called in for questioning once on August 5th, 2026. Then a second call on Tuesday resulted in his immediate arrest.
Let me guess, there's a major election coming up.
Nailed it. The Punjab Assembly elections are right around the corner. AAP is the ruling party in Punjab, and Satyendra Jain serves as the party's co-in-charge for the state.
Okay, so from the defense's perspective, this is like a referee pulling the opposing team's star coach off the field, like 5 minutes before the championship game.
That's exactly how they see it.
They're arguing this isn't about water tenders, it's about disrupting a political campaign.
Yeah, the defense is explicitly framing this sudden deprivation of liberty as an electoral maneuver. They're arguing in court that taking him into custody right now lacks material justification, especially given how old the FIR actually is.
It really highlights how every administrative and legal action is being viewed through this intensely electoral lens right now, which actually brings us right back to the broader ideological positioning of the opposition. The Times of India noted something fascinating amidst all this modern political maneuvering from that CWC meeting.
Oh, the Vande Mataram thing?
Yes. The committee actually took the time to officially reaffirm their stance on singing Vande Mataram, the national song.
They did. They passed a resolution reaffirming that they will stick to singing only the first 2 stanzas of the song. And, you know, the historical anchoring they're using to justify this is incredibly deliberate. Well, Mallikarjun Kharge actually read aloud the original party resolution from 1937 during the meeting.
1937. If you're wondering how a 90-year-old resolution applies to modern elections, what is the connection? Like, why does that matter today?
It matters because of who signed that 1937 document. That specific 2-stanza compromise was endorsed by Mahatma Gandhi, Subhas Chandra Bose, Rabindranath Tagore, Sardar Patel, and Jawaharlal Nehru. The original, longer version of the song has stanzas that some communities historically found religiously exclusive. So by aggressively sticking to the 1937 version, Congress is basically trying to wrap itself in the legacy of the original freedom fighters. They are signaling to voters, hey, we are the true, inclusive inheritors of the national movement.
That is a very powerful symbolic play, and it pairs perfectly with their aggressive on-the-ground rhetoric. The Times of India mentioned that beyond the history lesson, the CWC mapped out plans to expand their Chatran Ki Gunj student protests to 800 towns.
800 towns is huge.
Huge. And furthermore, they officially categorized the current government's foreign policy as a, quote, surrender policy.
which is a highly inflammatory label. It's totally designed to attack the government on national security, which is traditionally a strong suit for the ruling party.
Right. Well, let's test that surrender policy claim against the actual reality at the border. We have a direct bridge here. The Times of India has a report featuring Union Minister Kiran Rijiju. He firmly and publicly rejected reports claiming that Chinese troops have made a 60-kilometer incursion into Arunachal Pradesh.
Right, and Rijiju addressed the issue by explaining the underlying mechanics of the border dispute itself. He pointed out that the border in that specific region remains formally undemarcated.
Meaning there isn't a solid, universally agreed-upon line drawn in the dirt.
Exactly, and because of that ambiguity, both militaries have different perceptions of where the boundary actually lies. He argues this leads to overlapping patrols, which causes confusion, sure, but it does not equate to the actual capture of an Indian village by Chinese troops.
Okay, I understand the technicality of differing perceptions, but if I'm a local villager living in that area, and I see foreign troops 60 kilometers closer to my home than they used to be, I'm not going to care about diplomatic ambiguity. I'm going to panic.
Oh, absolutely.
So why is the anxiety on the ground so high if there is supposedly no incursion?
Because the conflict you're seeing isn't just physical troops holding ground, it's administrative, it's cartographic. Imagine you and your neighbor are arguing over where the property line is, and in the middle of the night, your neighbor publishes a widely circulated map renaming your garden shed and your driveway.
I would be furious.
Right. Well, China has been repeatedly attempting to assign its own Mandarin names to places within Arunachal Pradesh to establish a paper trail of sovereignty. And in direct response to that, the Indian government just formally identified 27 locations in the state by their standard Indian names on the official Survey of India maps. So even if physical troops haven't permanently crossed a 60-kilometer threshold, there is a very intense, ongoing war over maps and administration happening over that space.
It was wild. You see governments battling over maps and physical borders, but then we have a direct bridge to self-appointed groups trying to guard internal cultural boundaries.
This next story is deeply concerning.
It is. According to Money Control, an FIR has been filed in Pune after tourists were physically assaulted at the Sinhagad fort and their alleged crime. Simply wearing shorts.
It's a stark escalation.
Yeah. The police actually identified the accused as members of a group called the Samast Hindu Bandav Army. And this wasn't just an isolated scuffle with one person.
No.
The authorities noted that these attacks happened across 4 separate groups of visitors that afternoon. The complainant reported he was slapped, a woman in his group was dragged, and at the police station, he learned other tourists were actually struck with plastic rods.
And this is the critical mechanism you have to pay attention to here. It's the shift from passive moral policing, like, giving someone a dirty look or yelling at them, to coordinated physical enforcement by self-appointed vigilantes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it forces a massive question about public safety. I mean, who gets to dictate the cultural dress code at a public heritage site? When these groups take the law into their own hands to violently enforce their interpretation of culture, it puts law enforcement entirely on the back foot. They're just scrambling to restore order after citizens have already been hurt.
Yeah. But, while we see these aggressive domestic clashes over culture and control, it's actually fascinating to look at how India projects its culture and soft power abroad.
It really is a completely different playbook. The Times of India reports on a new Memorandum of Understanding, or MU, signed between India and Palestine. MOU is basically a formal agreement laying out a shared plan of action between nations.
Right.
Under this agreement, India is committed to building a 200-bed Indian super specialty hospital in Palestine, which will feature modern medical facilities and a dedicated trauma center.
And alongside the hospital, the MOU also includes establishing a technical and vocational education training center at the Palestinian National Printing Press. This is just a classic, highly effective form of soft power diplomacy. You build critical, life-saving infrastructure to foster deep international goodwill.
But it's not just pure charity, is it? I mean, There's a very tangible geopolitical return on investment happening here behind the scenes.
Absolutely there is. During this process, the Palestinian ambassador to India, Abdullah Abu Shwesh, very publicly backed India's bid for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council for the 2028-29 term.
Ah. There's the mutual benefit.
Yes. He even went a step further, pointing out that the Global South has long advocated for India to eventually have a permanent seat in a reformed Security Council. So you see the mechanism at play here. India uses its economic and medical capabilities to solve a dire humanitarian need in Palestine.
Right.
In return, Palestine uses its diplomatic voice to help elevate India's status on the global stage. It's a textbook reciprocal relationship.
Now, diplomacy works when there's mutual benefit, but domestic governance can sometimes completely misread the room. So we're moving from international humanitarian efforts to a very local debate over student rights and tragedy.
Yeah, case in point, this report from the Deccan Chronicle.
The Tamil Nadu government, led by Chief Minister C. Joseph Vijay, had to rapidly backpedal and withdraw a highly controversial order. Initially, they issued this urgent directive that barred college students from participating in protests organized by the youth movement, CJP, and other left-leaning student groups.
But the pushback from the public and civil rights groups was immediate, and it was fierce, forcing the government to officially withdraw the ban almost right away.
You have to ask, what were the students protesting in the first place that made the government so nervous they tried to ban assembly altogether?
Well, it stems from a terrible tragedy. And CG, a 21-year-old nursing student from Kerala, allegedly died by suicide after jumping from a building at Bethlehem Nursing College.
God, that's awful.
Her family and her peers are fiercely accusing the campus administration of harassing her over rules regarding smartphone use. They are alleging both an institutional cover-up by the college and severe investigative lapses by the state police.
So let me get this straight. The administration allegedly overreaches on a phone rule with fatal consequences. The students rightfully demand an investigation, and the state's initial reaction is to ban the students from being angry about it.
Basically, yes.
No wonder they had to withdraw it. I mean, it's a fundamental clash between an institution trying to blindly maintain order and citizens exercising their fundamental right to demand accountability for a lost life.
And that theme, a government trying to desperately contain local blowback, scales up perfectly to the international stage. According to the Times of India, Pakistan has formally summoned the top U.S. diplomat in Islamabad to lodge a protest.
A diplomatic summons is a huge deal. It's essentially a government calling a foreign ambassador into the principal's office for a formal dressing down. What triggered this?
The issue centers around U.S. envoy Sergio Gore. During his very first visit to Srinagar, Gore interacted with the media and casually described Jammu and Kashmir as an important part of India.
Let me pause you there. Just saying the phrase important part of India was enough to trigger an international summons.
In the highly contested context of Kashmir, yes, diplomatic language is heavily policed. But you have to look beyond just the rhetoric to the practical implications of Gore's visit.
Okay.
He didn't just stand there and praise the scenery. He held a high-level meeting with Chief Minister Omar Abdullah to discuss regional economic cooperation. And more critically, Gore hinted to reporters that Washington might review and potentially downgrade its travel advisory for Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay, explain the mechanics of that. Why does a travel advisory matter so much to Pakistan?
Because a travel advisory isn't just a warning for tourists, it's a geopolitical barometer.
Right.
If the U.S. officially downgrades the travel risk for Kashmir, it signals to the world the United States recognizes this area as stable, safe, and open for international business under Indian administration. If they alter that advisory, it moves way beyond words. It is a massive structural shift in the U.S. diplomatic posture toward the region's status, which is exactly why Pakistan reacted so strongly.
Makes total sense. All right, let's take a direct bridge from diplomatic victories to some historic statistical victories in sports. Though, honestly, the level of dominance here is almost geopolitical in its own right.
It really is.
Critinfo has published a breakdown of the sheer volume of milestones reached during India's test win against Sri Lanka in Gale.
The numbers are frankly staggering. First off, this was India's 600th test match. But the real statistical anomaly is that they have incredibly managed to secure victories in their 300th, 400th, 500th, and now 600th matches.
Well, it's insane.
Aligning victories with round number milestones like that over decades of play is just incredibly rare.
It's like hitting a hole-in-one on your birthday 4 decades in a row. And the individual performances behind the stats are what you really marvel at. You had Manav Suthar taking 10 wickets for 131 runs on his debut.
On debut.
Including a triple wicket over, which India hasn't seen since 2019. And then there's Devdutt Padikkal returning after missing 14 tests. And he just casually smashes a massive 167 in the first innings.
Yeah, and what this tells you is that India's bench strength is unparalleled right now. They aren't relying on one or two aging superstars. And if you zoom out from the individuals, consider this: India is now unbeaten in 11 consecutive tests against Sri Lanka since 2015.
Wow.
It's total suffocating dominance in that specific matchup. They have essentially figured out the exact algorithm required to dismantle Sri Lanka in these conditions.
Okay, so that kind of absolute suffocating dominance brings us right back to our final story, taking us from sports milestones to a very grim geopolitical milestone.
Yeah, this is intense.
The Times of India reports that Donald Trump has announced an economic D-Day against Iran. In a post on Truth Social, Trump outlined what he describes as the most severe economic operation ever imposed on a country.
He issued a very blunt warning. He said any nation providing financial or logistical support to Iran, and that ranges from oil smuggling to utilizing Iranian ship registries, they will face tremendous economic consequences from the United States.
The phrase that really caught my eye was economic warfare and isolation on an unprecedented scale. I mean, we've seen heavy sanctions before. How is this functionally different? Like, how does this actually work mechanically?
Well, normal sanctions usually target specific individuals, politicians, or, isolated companies. This operation is targeting the global plumbing of finance itself.
Oh, plumbing?
Yeah. Trump is explicitly targeting swap lines, which are agreements between central banks to exchange currencies and cash transfers through international exchange houses.
Okay, so if normal sanctions are like setting up roadblocks on the highways into a city, this is like turning off the water, cutting the electricity, and severing the internet cables all at once. You're cutting the central nervous system.
Exactly. And the most crucial part is that it's not just aimed at isolating Iran. It's a threat aimed directly at U.S. allies and neutral countries who currently maintain those economic lifelines with Tehran.
Right.
The U.S. is leveraging the sheer gravitational size of its economy to say to the rest of the world, look, you can do business with Iran, or you can have access to the U.S. economy, but you cannot do both. The sheer coercive scale of this policy is designed to force absolute compliance through financial gravity.
That is a massive use of institutional leverage. And that actually brings us to the end of our stack of sources today.
Before we wrap up, I want you to think about the invisible thread connecting almost everything we just discussed today.
It really all comes back to institutional control, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, think about it. You have the Supreme Court demanding structural, verifiable trust in a national medical exam. You have political parties fighting over historical songs and parliamentary seats to control a narrative. You have nations rigorously enforcing cartographic borders with maps. You have vigilantes violently enforcing dress codes at a fort. And finally, you have the U.S. weaponizing the entire global banking system. How much of our daily news is actually just institutions, whether it's a government, a court, or a political party, desperately trying to prove they still hold the reins in a world that is shifting faster than they can manage?
That is a brilliant question to keep in mind, and it really makes you read the headlines differently. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning what you read. Always look for the why behind the what, and we will catch you next time.
Take care.